He possessed mountains of gold. His armies were so vast that the ground trembled for weeks after they marched past. Yet, behind his back, his subjects referred to him by a single name, the foolish king. The king believed that reality itself was subordinate to his commands. Because he enjoyed evening strolls in cool weather, he once issued a formal royal decree ordering the sun to set 2 hours early. When his viziers suggested the sun was out of their jurisdiction, he had them whipped for doubting his power. To survive in his court, you had to applaud every unhinged command as an act of unmatched genius. A kingdom where a whim replaces the laws of nature is a fragile thing. It exists only as long as the people around the throne are willing to pretend that a lie is the truth. The king announced a challenge. Anyone who could answer his riddles would win half the kingdom. Anyone who failed would be thrown in the dungeon for life. He wasn't looking for a teacher. He was looking for someone to prove that his own mind was the greatest in the land. Then came a dervish. He arrived from the city's poorest district, dressed in a tattered rag and carrying a wooden bowl. But he looked at the king with a level of confidence that even the wealthiest generals lacked. The king asked what was heaviest and what was lightest in the universe. The dervish replied that human sin is the heaviest, dragging a person into the earth, while a person's intentions are the lightest, changing at the first hint of greed. The king then demanded the dervish read his mind. The dervish didn't flinch. He told the king he was currently paralyzed by a choice, whether to believe he was a world conqueror or to admit he was exactly what the people called him, a fool. The king's face changed. The dervish had spoken the one secret the king tried to hide even from himself. Disturbed and curious, the king invited the dervish to stay for a 7-day trial. The king thought he was testing the dervish's intelligence. In reality, the dervish spent the week pulling apart the king's understanding of how the world worked. They started with a golden bird. The king had trapped it in a gilded cage and fed it expensive seeds, but the bird was starving. The dervish simply opened the cage. The bird flew to a tree and ate common grass seeds. The lesson was simple. The king had provided what he wanted to give, not what the bird needed to live. Ruling by force ignores the actual needs of the living. Later, they saw 2 brothers fighting over a small plot of land, each claiming it belonged solely to him. The dervish knelt and placed his ear to the dirt. He told the brothers that the earth had spoken. It didn't belong to them, they belonged to it. Soon it would consume them both, just as it had their ancestors. Firm. The king's entire authority was based on owning land and controlling people. But the dervish had just shown that ownership is a temporary illusion held by people who will soon be dust. The king then presented a problem he couldn't solve. His people were starving. He had grain in his silos, but he knew if he gave it away, it would eventually run out. This chart shows the king's dilemma. Direct charity is a depleting resource, leading to a dead end. The dervish's response was handing a starving boy a fishing net, allowing him to feed his family indefinitely. The king was making his people beggars rather than capable. Finally, the dervish took the king to the top of his highest tower. He forced the king to look past the lit-up palaces and into the pitch-black slums. He told the king that his greatness was just a shadow cast by the suffering of a people living in that darkness. The king looked at his crown and no longer saw a prize. He saw a suffocating weight. He realized that the life he had built was a monument to himself, paid for by everyone else. But the king's advisors weren't interested in wisdom. If the king became a just ruler, they could no longer steal from the treasury. They needed the fool back. They stole the Koh-i-Noor diamond, the king's most prized possession, and planted rumors that the dervish had stolen it using magic. The king threw it all away. The week of lessons, the humility, the new perspective, it all vanished the moment his diamond was gone. He ordered the city burned if the jewel wasn't returned. The lessons didn't matter as much as the empty pedestal where the diamond used to sit. The king didn't just want his property back. He wanted the feeling of absolute control he had before the dervish arrived. The dervish was dragged into the throne room. The king, red-faced and screaming, demanded his diamond. The dervish stood perfectly still, watching a man who had chosen a piece of carbon over his own soul. Wisdom is not a prize you win once and keep forever. It's a choice you have to make every day. The ultimate test of your character isn't how you act when things are going well. It's whether you keep your eyes on the truth when the things you value most are taken away.